Early signing day is upon us. Virginia Tech football signed 16 high school and JUCO prospects on Wednesday morning and officially announced 3 transfers. We'll dive into all of that on episode 338 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, which starts right now. We record on Wednesday, December 20th from our high-tech studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Remember to like, subscribe, and refer the show to a friend, and head over to techsideline.com to check out our extensive editorial content. As always, the first month of subscriptions are free. Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. This episode is also presented by the Hokie Way. The Hokie Way's $250,000 stone-by-stone fundraising campaign is underway, and they have set a goal for Tech Sideline of raising $75,000. As of today, we have raised almost $58,000. To learn more and donate, click the link in our YouTube description or visit techsideline.com to find the link, or email us at staff@techsideline.com and ask how you can donate. I'm David Cunningham, Tech Sideline's managing editor. Chris Coleman, our lead analyst and columnist, is to my right. Our senior staff writer, Andy Bitter, is across the way. Will Stewart, our fabulous founder and general manager, who's enjoying a cookie, maybe some ASMR with Will Stewart at some point here, is in the fourth chair. And Nick Brown, as always, is behind the scenes producing. Will and Nick did a terrific job. Just want to shout those guys out, along with Giovanni Heater, who's not here, and Katie Adams, former podcast producer. Great job putting together all of the signing day content that you probably saw throughout the day today. If not, go check it out at techsideline.com. We had a whole signing day central page that Will was running, and Nick put together a lot of the videos. Been a very busy day for all of us. Signing day starts very, very early. Tech's first signing was Gabriel Williams just after 7 a.m. Kamari Copeland, the last one, was about 11:30, but press conferences and everything. How's today gone for you two, and what have your overall impressions been of today?
First of all, I was very shocked that Gabriel Williams was first to sign. Extremely.
Yeah. Right. They tweeted out, then they deleted it. It's like, I might have given that one away, I think.
Yeah. It was. We always knew it was going to be a small class after signing 26 last year, not counting the transfer portal guys, most of which are going to be on the team again next year. You knew they were going to have limited room in this year's class. But, I thought they did themselves some favors, like the number of the players they signed, some more than others. We'll talk about some specific guys later. When you sign a 16-man class, 15 of which are high school players, it's really hard to fill all your needs with just 15 guys. So, maybe you'd like to sign a tight end, but, how much room do you really have? They're very limited in numbers right now, especially since they want to sign a couple more portal guys. Price said today they're in a holding pattern with a couple. They're kind of waiting on answers or seeing how it's going to work out with a couple of portal guys. But other than that, they just don't have room for anybody else. And even then, they'll have to lose more players to get back to the 85 scholarship limit next year. So this was never going to be a big class, but I think there's some good, overall trends. They can continue to hit major schools like Highland Springs and DeMatha. They've signed a player from each of those schools each of the last 2 years. And, I think it got back into the 757 to a certain extent this year by signing a couple of the top players from that area. So, I think things are trending up. They've got a staff that understands recruiting. They also understand what Virginia Tech fans like to hear when it comes to recruiting. So signing day is actually becoming pretty popular with the fan base, I think, under Brent Pry.
You talking about fending off Penn State and the Nittany Cryans?
Yeah, buddy.
Like Brent Pry said. A little lighthearted poke. Settle down, Penn State fans, in my mentions. A little lighthearted poke. But I think it does sort of signal maybe a little more bravado on Pry's part, or the opportunity to have a little bit more bravado. You look at what they did in state this year. They signed 4 top 15 guys. Haven't done that since 2018, I believe, was the last time they did that. You look at last year's class, Penn State had 6 of the top 12. This year they had nobody in the state. And I don't know if that's a different direction Penn State's taking a little bit, but that was one of the issues that Pry had to address when he first got here was, hey, don't let these outside schools come in and poach all the top talent. Now there's still work to be done. Georgia, I think, had 2 of the top 3 in the state, including Chris Cole just down the road here at Salem. But 4 of the top 15 is pretty good work by this Hokies group. So I think Pry saying that and poking his former boss a little bit in lightheartedly was shows sort of the different state that Virginia Tech is in recruiting wise. I looked at the numbers, 41st nationally. Now that's in the 247 Sports composite rankings. A lot of that is volume based. You go by average recruit ranking. I think they were 29th of the teams. It was 87.99 this year for an average recruit ranking, which is the highest they've had since they've had that, been tracking that since I think 2010. So
was that 4th in the ACC? I think
something like that.
Yeah,
but I mean
so.
that's Virginia Tech's historical home in recruiting. They're not going to be Florida State. They're not going to be Clemson. Probably not even going to be Miami in terms of recruiting. But if they're after those schools and they're pulling classes like this and they find guys that they can develop like Virginia Tech always has, I think this could be a pretty good class.
The production of signing day, Tech makes it up to be this big, giant, glamorous thing. We all were there for about 90 minutes, 2 hours, and got to see it. Will, I'm sure you watched it when you were keeping up with the whole signing day thing because it was streamed this year. I'll start with you, Will. What do you feel like? Chris mentioned that Tech fans are starting to kind of feels like warm up to how fun of a day this can be. Do you feel like, I mean, Brent Pry and the way the staff interacts with these guys, sure, we as media maybe don't get a ton out of it because it's not like they're saying anything noteworthy or quote-worthy, but it's very positive and I feel like you can sense the energy sometimes through the camera and through your screen that you're watching it on.
Yes. So they live streamed it this year for the first time. And I think they did something really similar last year. They just didn't live stream it. And you could watch it on Triumph NIL. You could probably watch it on Instagram, Twitter. I watched it on the Hokie Sports YouTube channel. So I'm at my desk in my basement office at 7 a.m. and I didn't leave till like 11:45 a.m. So, I was pushing 5 hours at that point. And it's a really good production. Doing something that long live is not easy. And I thought Mitch Gerber, who emceed the whole thing, did a really good job. Mitch got very few breaks. And so he did a good job, and the technical part of it went off well. There were a couple times where they lost the feed to the recruits and their families. I think, it's, you watch it, and I want to figure out the right way to say this. Brent Pry is very enthusiastic, sometimes to the point of maybe being a little cheesy, although I didn't really feel that way today. I think either we're getting more used to him and how he is. Frank was very quiet and reserved. Fuente is Fuente. And Pry will actually, start yelling at the recruits and their families at some point,
not in a bad way.
Not in a bad way, just because, he's all pumped up, but what really came through was every recruit that zoomed in. They did roughly one recruit every 10 minutes, and every recruit that zoomed in had family members there. And you can tell by the way that Pry and the assistants talk to the family members that they know them. They know them well. They know them by name. They make jokes about what meals they ate, all kinds of stuff. So I had a buddy text me, a friend of mine who lives in Georgia, and he said, that was a really good production. And I said, they've done it before. This is just the first year they've live streamed. And he said, I know, but it seemed better this year. So good stuff. And 4.5 hours is a lot to chew, but give it a shot and take a look at it on Hokie Sports YouTube.
I think that's what you need recruiting to be these days, though. Like, there's a dog and pony show element to this thing, and it's not always fun to do that. And we saw what Pry's predecessor felt like in most press conference situations. Like, well, these guys are it just wasn't a lot of excitement when you're talking about these guys. You can feel that excitement come through in Pry, and whether that's forced or whether he's playing a role or whatever, it's out there, and that's the persona that he's putting out there, and that's what people feel about Virginia Tech, and you can feel that connection with a lot of these parents, their families, the players. I mean, it's an exciting day. Go out there and celebrate it. I think that sort of, plays into this idea that, players like being here. You see the retention rates that they've had with a lot of these guys that had options to maybe go to the NFL, maybe transfer somewhere else, and they've stayed. I think that all is in the same pot.
I think you can see the relationship aspect of it. And I think people think it's cliche when coaches and analysts talk about relationship building and recruiting, but when Pry's got those guys up there and you're watching the conversation and he's talking to them and they're talking about things like, we have no idea what they're talking about. This little inside stuff that they developed during the relationship building process. And the best types of recruiters for schools like Virginia Tech are the relationship builders. And those guys when you see them. So like Jim Cavanaugh called me last night, wished me a Merry Christmas. Jim Cavanaugh was a relationship guy as a recruiter, and that's why he was an elite recruiter. And, when he called me last night, it was signing day eve, and that actually put that thought in my head. I'm like, Cavanaugh's a relationship guy as a recruiter, and the fact that he's calling me to tell me Merry Christmas proves that. And that's why those guys are good recruiters. And I bet Derek Jones and Brent Pry, I bet they send out a lot of Merry Christmas messages to people that aren't even recruits and things like that. That's just how they are.
Yeah. One more thing I will add is that an event like this where you get to see the recruits and their families and you get to see them and hear them, I think that's important because football players are, for most of us, for most people, football players are guys who are way down on the field, can't even see their faces. You don't know what they look like. They all wear the same uniform and they've got a number, and that's how you don't really know them as people. So particularly in the social media day and age, people can say some pretty brutal things about athletes. Mm-hmm. I think if you see them like that and see their families, it makes that less likely to happen if you feel like this athlete and their family.
Well, it was a drama-free signing day. I mean, Virginia Tech basically wrapped up its class over the summer. Small class too, 15 high school guys plus one JUCO guy in Copeland, defensive tackle who committed on Monday. That shouldn't, like you mentioned at the top, that shouldn't really be a surprise considering Virginia Tech retains so many guys. And I think that's where we get to the numbers part, where after in Brent Pry's press conference, he was asked about numbers crunching, and he's like, it has to make an awful lot of sense for us to take guys right now. I think Tech's kind of in that point where, well, we only can take so many guys, and we'd like to take some, and he straight up said it. There are guys who want to be here, and we can't take them because we don't have room.
There was one receiver who's like ranked in the top 15 in the state in high school who tried to commit to Tech on his visit, and there was just not room for him in the class. Particularly now that, and this was well before all the transfer portal guys said they were coming back. So, there's a numbers crunch. I think the numbers are always flexible depending on who wants to commit, right? But right now, it would take a guy they thought was an absolute can't miss.
You think they'd find room for a 5-star?
I think they might find that.
like a Chris Cole.
If Chris Cole came up and changed his mind, I think they might be able to find room for him. But for the most part, it would be tough to justify adding anybody else. I think they want to add another defensive tackle. Transfer defensive tackle, maybe a running back. Price said they're waiting on 2 guys today. We don't know for sure who those 2 guys are, but it's just very limited room. I mean, and we'll see who leaves. We'll see who else hits the portal after spring practice and see if there's any needs there and see who's available in the portal from other schools then. I mean, this thing isn't done, but for the most part, we know what the roster is going to look like next year.
I've got them at 90 scholarships right now, including everybody that just signed and all the guys who could come back. I did say today that Grant Wells is moving on.
I've got to take him off our list.
So that gets him down to 90. They're still waiting on Keontae Jenkins. So I think good chance he comes back. Nick Gallo, uncertain at tight end. Clayton Frady, I can't imagine he would come back given the playing time that he had this year. Maybe encourage him to go check out a different situation there. But then I look at the rest of the roster, and in the past, I could look at 15 to 20 names and go, that would make sense to go in the portal. That number's a lot lower now. There are still a few names out there that you go, yeah, I could see that. In some positions, they're maybe a little bloated numbers-wise right now. But it is a lot tighter than it was before. I mean, the numbers always work. They'll get to 85. The question is, will they get to 83 to be able to add 2 more guys like maybe they want to?
Yeah. I think Price talked about the hard conversations before, and I think he's turned this into an enjoyable program to play in. So the harder he might have to have more harder conversations now, because I think it's tougher to get guys to want to go away.
Well, also before he had the new head coach rule where he could just remove them from the roster if he wanted to. And that is no longer his disposal now 2 years in like this.
Yeah, he could just remove them from the roster, but they remained on scholarship.
Stay on scholarship, but they wouldn't be playing football.
Yeah. Before we dive into all these guys, kind of go position by position, you feel like Tech hit most of what it needed to, just about everything it needed to on both sides of the ball?
I can't have any complaints. Now that we know Daquan Wright is transferred, maybe you try to take a tight end. If Gerard Johnson ends up getting big enough to slide into defensive tackle, maybe you wish you would have signed another defensive end. Again, like there's not a true inside linebacker in this class. Love Gabe Williams, but he's a star linebacker.
What is Gerard? Is he 245?
250.
250.
He's listed at 235 on the sites, but he's 250.
They say Gabe could play anywhere, depending on how much he grows.
Right, but the thing is, it's, for me, it's
we're talking about Gabe Williams.
It's like Tech right now has a team full of linebackers that were other positions, and they've all grown, and they still can't play linebacker very well. So for me, I want they specifically said today, what we like about Sam Brumfield is, I forget which coach who was up there said it. He was like, he's a true linebacker. And that's what I've been saying the whole time. A true, natural, instinctive linebacker, not just an athlete who can run. I think Gabe's going to be a great player for Virginia Tech. I just think you can't slot him as an inside linebacker right now. It could happen. It absolutely could. But you can't sit here and say, oh, it's definitely going to happen. So for me, the lack of a natural, instinctive, we know 100% certainty this guy's played inside linebacker his whole high school career, right? Not even like Chris Cole did that. He didn't move to a traditional linebacker position until this year as a senior. Really, the guy I think from a traditional linebacker sense that they missed out on was Bodie Cahoon, also from the Roanoke, Salem area, who's going to Notre Dame. Yeah. I think from a true inside linebacker perspective, that's probably could be their bigger miss.
I think when you look at trying to like plug holes in the roster, I don't know if you look at the freshman class and go, well, we've addressed that need. Because, I mean, almost none of these guys in the freshman class will contribute next year. I mean, you look at who was the biggest contributor this year? Mose Phillips, Caleb Woodson. Mm-hmm. I mean, both backup roles. Nobody offensively, I think, played that much.
Aiden Green.
But even that was like, what do you have, like, a couple catches, if that.
4 or 5, yeah.
I mean, just not these huge roles. Virginia Tech is just not a place where guys come in and you plug and play them as true freshmen like that. They're going to have to develop a redshirt year. Point to the sign probably helps everybody in this situation. So you're like, well, they didn't fill this spot. It's like, okay, well, if they need that spot, then you go to the portal and you plug it, and then you see where the holes develop in these classes over time.
Yeah, you try to project the holes 2 and 3 years and 4 years from now when you sign freshmen.
I think the big key is like if 3 defensive tackles are leaving right now, like that was they saw that last year and they go, we need to address
when they didn't sign any tackles last year.
Exactly,
they knew they had to sign multiple.
So they brought in some immediately, but then they've also signed some for further down.
They had to do the double whammy basically.
So I was going to read the quote from Derek Jones on Brumfield.
Sure,
he said, "Quote." The thing we were looking for at the linebacker position, we needed a playmaker. We needed a leader. We needed a guy that could mimic Coach Marv's energy. We needed a guy that communicates Coach Marv's mindset and that could relate with him as a linebacker coach and the coordinator to be able to get the things done that we need to get done there.
Yep. And that's certainly part of it. I haven't, they moved Tisdale inside to Mike this year. He's not a natural Mike. Keller was the same player he was as a freshman. The guy that's really, I think, has made progress over time is Jaden McDonald at the will spot. And I think they were kind of giving him a hard look. Like in the UVA game at one point, when they brought Kelly Lawson in, they actually moved Jaden McDonald to Mike just to take a look at him in a blowout. in that game because they're trying to figure out all their options there. And he has played that role in the past, but I think ultimately he's going to be your starting Will, and Brumfield's going to start at Mike. And I think Brumfield I said we weren't going to talk about transfer portal guys today, but he's a big individual pickup.
Well, we're going to talk about him a little bit towards the end, especially just because the coaches talked about it. Sure. This was the first opportunity we got that the coaches could talk freely about the guys. But we're going to talk about the high school kids first. We're going to start on the offensive side of the ball. Tech signed 7 kids on offense. Let's start with Davi Belfort, the quarterback from Florida. What I'm going to do for each of these guys, for a lot of them, I've got a quote, some shorter, some longer, of what one of the coaches that we spoke with said about them. Pry, about Belfort, said, intangibles are off the chart. What is your initial feeling about Belfort? And I think it's kind of interesting when Pry, I think Andy asked, I can't remember if it was Pry or if it was Mines, about the similarities between the quarterbacks on the roster. And he just pointed to the intangibles. Yeah,
he's got some improvisation skills for sure. He keeps his head up when he runs, but he also makes some unique throws. Like he'll flip it to receivers at the last second, like some old Brett Favre moves from when I was a kid watching the Packers. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he can run. I mean, you can't go out there and run him 15 to 20 times in a game like you do drones. He's not big enough to do that, but he can run. He's got experience. They run some RPO down there. He's a 3-year starter, so he's got plenty of on-field experience. I think he's a solid pickup for Virginia Tech, especially a year after they signed Pop Watson.
Yeah, they cornering the market and sub 6 foot mobile quarterbacks that are out there. I don't know. He seems to have a lot of swagger to him. I saw his picture. He's got like the white shades on, wearing the Hokie Stone uniform in his picture. I think he said who would play him in a movie. He said Mark Wahlberg. So I don't know what to read into that.
I'm sure he's got a certain level of confidence. Can you imagine what it's like having 2 famous parents?
I know.
Right.
Well, we were saying that if there's a battle royale between the parents of athletes at any school, that Virginia Tech is well positioned with Scott Steiner and Vitor Belfort. Yeah. And somebody mentioned to throw Donovan Strong, Dorian Strong in there too. I don't know. Those might be show muscles. I don't know if they come into play in a fight, but interesting prospect.
I wouldn't tempt fate.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't.
Running back Tyler Mason from Mount Airy, North Carolina. Fontel Mine said, quote, I don't think I've been around anybody at any level, including rec league back in the day, that can average 13 yards every time they touch the ball.
Whew, yeah, that's hard. What was it, over 7,000 career yards?
I think it was 6,000.
Over 120 touchdowns.
Back-to-back 2,200-yard seasons or something like that, a state championship. Did it at the single A level, so that he's going to have to figure it out against a higher level of competition. But, like I said in our videos last week, physically he reminds me a decent amount of Malachi Thomas at the same stage, except I think he's a little bit more filled out.
Yeah, and I think when you add him, now you got 5 running backs here. Like, you think back 2 years ago when they had 10 running backs in that room, and like when you talk about sorting the roster out and balancing out the positions, that is the highlighted portion of that. Is you don't have 6 guys in the running back room that just have no chance of getting on the field. You can disperse that to other spots on the field. So, Tootin, Thomas. They like Coney in that freshman class who redshirted, Mitchell as well there, and now Mason coming in. I think you have your running backs. I mean, unless someone leaves, I can't imagine them bringing in another running back.
I think the thing there is that Tootin will be gone after this year, and then
he will. I mean, let's see what if Tootin stays. Does that mean Thomas is going to stay too now?
Yeah,
if he's going to be option 1B in a situation, so you can never tell with stuff like this.
But I think the interesting thing is that, eventually down the road, probably next year, they're going to have another back to replace Tootin. And whether it's one of those guys or whether they bring somebody in, but I think the room is much better positioned, because I think for a while there, when you think back to last season, Tech did not have a consistent running back at all. Tech was searching for a running back, anybody to just run the ball. Now the offensive line, there were a lot of problems.
They had a healthy one on a week-to-week basis.
But I just remember highlight of the season for running backs outside of Jalen Holston's game against Liberty was Keyshawn King's run against Boston College. It was like a 60-yard run
in a game where he got hurt.
That's right.
It's like the guys running back couldn't stay healthy, and they were inconsistent. And now you've built the offensive line up a little bit, and now you're bringing in guys who have been very productive at the high school level. Andy mentioned it. They love Jeremiah Coney. And Traylon Mitchell, I think, was a little bit dinged up this year. But then you still got Malachi Thomas, and you bring back Bashal Tootin.
Yeah, gosh, you remember 2022 when Bryce Duke and Chance Black played so much that year. I mean, they couldn't redshirt Duke because of that. And now that he's in the portal, I feel bad for him that he didn't get to redshirt that year because he's only got 2 years left, unless he uses a redshirt somewhere else. Anyway, the fact that those two guys played a lot in 2022 and then barely got on the field at all in 2023 just shows how much better and healthier the Virginia Tech running back room was this year.
2 big wide receiver commits from the Commonwealth. Keelan Adams from Green Run, record-setting running back from Virginia Beach. Brent Price said, quote, long yet slippery. Game comes easy to him. I think he's a guy that has a chance to help us early. Then there's Chance Wiggins from King George. Fontel Mine said he's, quote, very similar in a lot of aspects to DeQuan Felton, just as far as his character, just as far as his intensity, just as far as his demeanor, just as far as his work. Chris, what stands out to you about those 2 wide receivers? And this is a wide receiver room that returns everybody.
Yeah,
except
everybody.
for DeJuan Lofton, who entered the transfer portal. Top 4 guys are back. Brent Price says, I think he's a guy who has a chance to help us early. How much playing time is there to go around?
That's a great question. I don't know, but I agree with him on Adams and his talent. Slippery is the right word. I think he's a guy who could play on the outside or could play on the inside. He's got that type of versatility. Very prolific. I like guys who put up big numbers in high school. Sometimes, you see a running back who rushed for 700 yards and you're like, I don't know why they're signing him. Of course, that was the case with Khalil Herbert, and that worked out for Khalil. But I would generally like to see a running back rush for 1,000 yards in high school, and sometimes you don't see that. And I like wide receivers that put up big numbers, and Keelan Adams certainly did that. So he can be your flexible guy, can play on the inside or the outside. I think he could play next year. I don't think they'll need him to. If he plays next year, it'll be because he earned it. Because the guys ahead of him are really good. Like even guys like Aiden Green, he's a good player. He's just stuck behind a bunch of other, even better, more experienced players. So Aiden Green's going to have to wait his turn. And Keelan Adams, if those guys want reps, they're going to have to fight for him. They're going to have to scratch and claw for him because those older guys aren't going to give him up without a fight. Chance Wiggins, I think he's an outside receiver all the way with his size. And, they signed Chance Fitzgerald there last year as an outside receiver. So they've got options there now down the line. And he's another guy whose production went up as a senior.
Pretty good size on both those guys. Wiggins 6'3", 200. Adams 6'2", 185. I mean, you're not talking about 5'10" receivers or something like that. They have plenty of those guys in the program right now. Having some size out there on the outside is pretty nice. Do we know the story behind Keelan Adams? I mean, that picture where he's holding his dog like the football.
I don't know, but it's a great picture.
I was meaning to ask that at the press conference, but did not find the right time to get in there and be like, what's the deal with this dog?
So you got to ask Gio that one because people were starting to talk about it, and I went and I looked at Keelan Adams' Twitter feed, couldn't find it there. Looked at his Instagram, couldn't find it there.
I've seen it somewhere before.
Yeah, I don't know where Gio found it.
I thought it was on his Instagram feed when I saw it.
Well, the picture's there. It's not like we made that like a.
Nick,
what if we replaced the football with a small dog? Like that?
Nick says it's on his Instagram. Oh, it may have been like multiple pictures. Yeah. Right.
Another question about the receivers, though. I thought it was interesting what Fontel Mine said about Aiden Green. He talked about, in terms of the impact of the returners coming back on the younger guys. He said, quote, I had a pretty unique conversation with Aiden Green towards the end of the season. I'm honest with guys. I'm transparent with those guys. We always have an open line of communication. He said, I want those guys to come back. It's going to make me better. It's going to make us better. I feel like
Green said that about
Aiden
the older
Green said that
players.
about the older 4 wide receivers coming back. That just, I feel like, kind of just speaks to the culture of the program as a whole and where Tech is going.
Yeah, Green was always a good prospect, and coaches talk about this all the time, but people always kind of ignore it and just go back to star rankings and things like that. But like, yeah, you need to get as many guys as possible in your program who are team players and what's best for the team. Like Green's a good player, but there's a lot of players out there that are like, well, I only caught 4 or 5 passes this year, and Ollie Jennings is coming back, so I'll probably catch even less next year, so I'm just going to transfer, right? But Aiden Green's not doing that, which I think that means there's a credit to him, and I think it shows that they did their due diligence and their scouting on his personality and the type of person and the type of player he is. But yes, that's what you want in your program is like you want players that want to be challenged, and if Aiden Green wants to be challenged like that, he might not get as many snaps next year as he would like, but it will still make him a better long-term football player because he's got to fight for playing time, and just competition makes everybody better.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, they have 12 guys in the receiver room now. 7 of those guys are sophomores or younger. So, I mean, you have the 4 coming back and Tucker Holloway going into his junior year coming up. Should be redshirt sophomore year if you'd just taken the red shirt that freshman year. Point to the sign again. But that'll be a challenge for Fontel. And everybody's talking nice about it right now. And but no, these guys are sticking around. And none of them are going to transfer. Maybe you get a different feeling once you get in there in January or you go through spring ball and you're like, man, I'm just not getting a lot of reps here. Because, I mean, there's another transfer window further down the line. So if they keep all 12 of those guys in the fold, I mean, just give Fontel another raise at that point. I mean, that's a job well done because at a position like receiver, let's be honest, a lot of egos in a receiver's room. I mean, that's a tough thing to juggle. So that'll be interesting for me watching going forward, whether he's able to do that and kind of keep those good vibes going there.
At offensive line, Tech signed 3, Aiden Lynch from Mount Olive, New Jersey, Tommy Ricard from Hudson, Ohio, Webb Davidson from Macon, Georgia. Lynch and Davidson are both 6'7". Where do you think those guys are going to kind of shake out? Red shirts, I assume? I mean,
I would think so. I think the vast majority of offensive linemen need to redshirt. Like even a guy like Christian Darisaw, like he played as a true freshman, started as a true freshman,
but he prepped, right?
He prepped at Fork Union for a year. There was a year in between, and there had been guys like that. It's like Wyatt Teller, I think, is one of the most physically dominating linemen in Tech history, and he redshirted. Right, he came in at like 275 pounds. Next year he was 300 and moved from the defensive line and then took off. So yeah, I think those 2 guys that you mentioned will redshirt and their tackles. Ricard is a guard. Although he's played left tackle in high school, all 3 of these guys have played left tackle at various points in high school.
Tech listed him as an offensive guard / center. And he's 6'4", 285.
Yeah, Tech, they'll have to find somebody else with experience snapping the ball. I think you can never have enough guys with experience snapping the ball because if something happened to Caden Moore, then you could be in a real bad place. I think Ricard made a lot of progress as a senior, like from junior year to senior year. Now, granted, I don't think Davidson has posted any senior film so far, but I think from junior year to senior year, I think Ricard really made a lot of progress. He's a really physical player. Tech strained the limits of the 6-hour radius. He's from Cleveland, right on the edge.
A couple of Ohio guys,
both from the Cleveland area.
Yeah, and the linemen. I don't really have a lot to add on the offensive linemen, but Webb Davidson, his father's name is Will, and he has brothers named Win and Witt. So I think it's required that he has a W name there. And Aiden Lynch had the best fun fact about it, is he once ate 45 wings at an Applebee's. So
exactly 45.
Somebody sent the GIF of from Talladega Nights of Will Ferrell's fathers, and he's like, "Let's go get kicked out of an Applebee's," or something like that. I'm like, eating 45 wings might do. That's a lot of wings.
That's a lot of wings.
Even in my prime, I couldn't come close to eating that much. So that's all I had to add with those guys.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the 3 offensive linemen kind of got lost in the shuffle of the press conference because we kind of asked about everybody else, and no Ron Crook there to answer questions.
Yeah,
so.
and the offensive linemen are so hard to evaluate.
Yeah, and you could ask Fontel Mines. It'd be best if Pry talked about him, but
Sure.
But you could ask Fontel Mines to talk about him, but he doesn't work with those guys on a regular basis.
Right. Yeah.
Ricard is the Ohio native. The other Ohio native is Andrew Hanchuk, defensive tackle, which we'll talk about in 1 second. On the defensive side of the ball, we'll start with Gerard Johnson from Cox High School in Virginia Beach. One of those 4 top 15 pickups from in-state. Brent Price said, quote, "He has an unbelievable frame, very athletic, played tight end as well this year. His potential as an end, as a D tackle, I'm not sure yet. He's 250 right now. He's 6'4".
Yeah, he's right about the frame, and the camera view isn't as far in, but from a frame standpoint, he kind of reminds me of Nigel Williams, who went on to play defensive tackle at Virginia Tech back in the day. And Williams was a defensive end in high school, and his film was so good in high school that I thought there was a possibility he might actually be able to stay lean enough to play defensive end. Didn't end up happening. He ended up becoming a very good defensive tackle for Tech. But, I could see the same thing happening to Gerard Johnson. I don't know that he's quite as big, but like I said, the camera view for Nigel Williams was a little bit closer, and it was at a different angle, so I could get a better grasp of exactly how big he was. But Gerard Johnson was listed at like 235 as a recruit last summer, and yeah, he's kept getting bigger, and he's got good balance too, I think, and a good motor. You'll see him chase down screens from behind on film, and those plays as a tight end stood out, which is another reason he reminded me of Nigel Williams, who was also a pass catching tight end at Benedictine in Richmond, and so yeah, that actually I just thought of that comparison today. I wish I'd known it when we did our videos last week, but yeah, so that's what I'm going with. I don't know if he'll play defensive tackle like Williams, but he reminds me of Nigel Williams.
I don't know if you're 250 coming in, and you figure a redshirt year or a learning year, even if he gets on the field a little bit, and the size that you're going to gain in the strength program, like you're already straining what weight-wise about what Tech has on their defense, and
he's already bigger than APR.
Yeah, like you want Pry always wants quick, fast guys off the edge, guys that can set the edge and things like that. And so, I think just from where he's starting out coming into college, it feels like tackle might be the direction that goes. I mean, it's always nature. Where's it going to go? How are you going to go once you eat at West End quite a bit? I guess that's less so now. They have the student athlete performance center where they can just go eat there, maybe eat a little bit more healthily there. But I don't know, 250 coming in feels awful tacklish to me. Eventually,
he chose Tech over UVA. You don't see that very often.
You don't see too many in-state battles these days between those two programs. Yeah, I think he made the right decision.
Derek Dandy, he's a guy that Brent Price said he was the very first commit in the class, but did not announce it publicly.
Silent commit.
He verbaled to Tech. Davi Belfort was the first to commit publicly, but Derek Dandy barely beat him out. Brent Price said, quote, "He's a natural pass rusher, great bend, great lean, can get low, good feet, can turn, pretty raw still, but has length. I'm excited about him."
Yeah, I think that's a fair description. I think I think it was 33 tackles for loss he made as a senior this past year, and again, he's at Mount Airy, so single A, not great competition, but you can see the athleticism. It does stand out on film, but with his size, he's going to have to take a redshirt year. But that's okay. Tech has plenty of defensive ends. How many times have we said redshirt today?
48 tackles for loss as a senior, 11.5 sacks.
Jeez.
He also had the my favorite fun fact, I think, of the entire time.
Yes.
Who would play you in a movie? And he said Dominic Toretto, which
awesome.
I don't know if he realizes that's the character's name of Vin Diesel in the Fast and Furious franchises. So I don't know if he thinks that he just exists in the Fast and Furious franchises. I don't know, but also he looks nothing like Vin Diesel. There would be a lot of wigs that he'd have to wear to make this thing work.
Well, who would play you in a movie?
I don't
know, but Vin Diesel. I tweeted that his Derek Dandy saying must be, "I live my life 1/4 back sack at a time," instead of 1/4 mile at a time. So
I feel like this is a good time to ask Will. Will, who would play you in a movie?
Oh, Tom Cruise, of course.
No doubt.
Good answer.
My favorite movie of all time is Risky Business. So
Good answer
easy.
from Will.
I thought I'm not going to know the answer to this question, and then it came to me.
Chris, I know you're not going to do your half-star system until signing the actual or late. I don't want to call it late, but normal signing day rolls around. In February.
It's not normal anymore. It is. I would call it late. Yeah.
So I don't know where this guy will stack up, but Emmett Laws
he'll
from
be a
DeMatha, from a DeMatha guy. I didn't write down who said this, but I believe this was Brent Pry. He said, quote, Emmett is all disruption. His minus yardage plays as a young guy at the high school level. It didn't matter run game, throw game, or it was against in a very good league against a very tough schedule. Emmett was productive all the time, and he's got an incredible story with his determination. You heard about that, and you wrote something down.
Tech, yeah. They're getting a guy who really dedicates himself to football. So he went to DeMatha in Hyattsville, which is basically in D.C., but he wasn't from there. He commuted 5 hours on a train every day in high school to go to DeMatha.
Do you see where his hometown is? Elkton, Maryland.
Elkton,
it's
Maryland.
like as far northeast as you can get in Maryland. Like it is a long
like
ways from DC.
He wakes up. He wake up at 4 a.m. every day. He catch the 5:20 train. Go to DeMatha, go to school all day, have football practice at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Get done with that. He catch the 6:42 train back to his home. Get home around 9 p.m. He'd do his homework on the train. Then he'd go to bed at 10 or 11 at night. Wake up at 4 a.m. the next day, rinse and repeat. Imagine doing that every day. I don't remember the last individual day that I woke up at 4 a.m.
It's usually make a flight.
Right.
That's the only time I wake up that early
like
for
that.
anything.
Exactly
Yeah,
right.
but he's doing that and playing football. And keeping up with school.
Right. So, like, if you think about it, they practice football at 4 p.m. He's already been awake for 12 hours at that point. It's already been a full day for him. So I just think this guy, he's a talented player. The fit for the scheme is excellent. He's highly motivated. I've heard that he really takes it personal when people tell him that he's too small. He's well coached at DeMatha. They have excellent coaches at DeMatha. So I just think that those things combined with how clearly he is dedicated to being the best football player he can be. Like, there's no such thing as a sure thing in recruiting, if you're Virginia Tech, but this guy's as close to a sure thing as you're going to get. So he's a 4-star for me, for sure.
He's going to show up for the 6 a.m. workouts and be like, why are we doing this so late?
Yeah,
this is ridiculous. How about we get up early for these things and get them out of the way?
Pat Narduzzi and Pitt were one of the teams on their tail. I know you like Pat Narduzzi evals. Does he have that twitch that Charlie Wiles would have absolutely loved?
Yeah, no doubt. He would play defensive end for NC State, but he could have played it there. I think this is a guy who could play for a lot of schools. I think it's really interesting. I've written this in my column for tomorrow, but he'd be a 3-technique defensive tackle at Virginia Tech most of the time. The recruiting services, I think they underrate your smaller 3-technique defensive tackles. Like, I'm looking through 247, and 16 of their top 20 defensive tackles are 6'4" or taller, and it's something like 19 of their top 25. Meanwhile, the NFL, I think, is ahead of the curve. I think they're ahead of the recruiting services. Like, you've seen Aaron Donald as a 3-technique, 6'1", 280 pounds, be a first-round pick. There's another guy who went to Houston and within the last few years was a first-round pick, went 9th overall. I forget who he plays for now. 6'1", 287 pounds. If you're 6'1", 280 pounds, if you're projected to be that big and you're coming out of high school, they're gonna be like, oh, 3 stars, you're not good enough. NFL's drafting him in the first round, right? And so I just think the recruiting services and maybe some colleges too have missed the boat on defensive tackles like this. This guy's a pure football player who's very dedicated. He's going to be very good.
Well, it's a measurables industry.
Yes.
And that's true in high school recruiting. It's true in the NFL draft. But it can make you look stupid in hindsight. I mean, Aaron Donald, when he was picked 13th or something like that, and it happened, it's like, they got the best player in the draft. We saw close and personal how he played against the Hokies a couple of times. Like, man, that guy just dominated. Then it turns out he's an incredible player in the pros. Now, I'm not comparing Emmett Laws to Aaron Donald, but don't overlook guys at tackle because of their size. Because I think people are like, oh yeah, you'd love to have the 6'5", 330-pound guy that can move in there. Of course you would, but you know, 6 foot, 280, those guys can move and make plays. They're not just there to like plug holes in the center of the line. They can actually, you know, get by their guy and disrupt and get in the backfield. And those guys are pretty valuable.
So to your point, Aeneas Peebles, the transfer from Duke, 6'1", 286.
Exactly.
Norrell Pollard, almost the exact same size. And they were two of the better pass rushing tackles in the ACC, correct? You guys have looked at
did you read my article yesterday?
Yep.
Okay. So, yeah, statistically and grade-wise, I mean, they're identical twins, basically. I mean, this is the type of defensive tackle that has succeeded for Virginia Tech. Go back to J.C. Price, right? He was that way. David Pugh. All the way up through the modern era. There's
Jeff Holland.
Yeah, right. No, he was not a traditional. He wasn't. Yeah, Jeff was tall for a Tech defensive
He's probably like
tackle.
6'3". You got to mention Jeff on the podcast.
Derek Hopkins is another one.
Yeah,
I remember seeing him in like a parking lot at Tech after his career was over, at like a tailgate, and I'm like, he had just finished his career at Tech, and I'm like, whoa, that's Derek Hopkins. He does not look like
he was not 6 feet tall.
Right, yeah. Exactly, yeah. So just don't worry about it. Those defensive tackles with a low center of gravity that understand levers and that are quick, you can make really good players.
The quickness, I think, is the big part. I think that's what they want on this defensive line, and they all just want guys that are just going to, okay, I'm here, and they're not coming up the middle, but I'm not getting into the backfield to do stuff. I think in J.C. Price's ideal world, all four of those guys in the line could be a threat to get to the quarterback.
I tell you, a guy who is not that size is Andrew Hanchuk.
Yep.
He's listed as 6'5", 275 on Tech's site. Brent Bry referred to him as 6'4", 300.
No
quote,
difference.
"This is a big, strong motor guy. They're hard to deal with. He's got tremendous size. He's going to be a 6'4", 300-pound D tackle that can run and plays hard like a big old St. Bernard."
Yeah, I'll get Brandon.
St. Bernard,
I'll get
like
Brandon Patterson to do an article on how Tech uses defensive tackles. But you've got your 3 technique, which lines up on a guard's outside shoulder between the guard and the tackle. And you've got one that plays kind of a 1 technique that's on the guard's inside shoulder between the guard and the center. And he might face more of your double teams. So maybe you want the bigger guy in that 1 technique role. And then the disruptor in the 3 technique role. And ideally. And I think Hanchuk fills one of those roles while Laws fills the other one. So I think that's a good 1-2 combo. Hanchuk was injured in high school, so didn't get a lot of recruiting hype. But
do you hear what J.C. Price said to him about that? He said that was the best 4 games of film I've ever seen.
And that was his junior year. So I mean, you think about
exactly.
the recruiting process. That's what a lot of schools look at when they're recruiting guys, because that's when the offers come out after the junior year a lot. And guys have made their decision. I forget when he committed, but I'm pretty sure he committed before his senior season.
Yes.
So that's to Virginia Tech's advantage if they can get on guys like that have a great senior season, and all of a sudden everybody's on them if you're already in the boat with them ahead of time.
Gabe Williams from Maryland. He was the top recruiter for Virginia Tech, coach and player this year. I asked Brent Pry about that. He said, quote, "You need that. There's going to be guys in every class that leave that door open just enough that it can get squirrely on them. So you need some footholds that are going to keep them together, keep them focused, and keep them believing." And Gabe has certainly done that. Not only is he really, really talented, tremendous potential with his length and speed and athleticism, his intelligence, but he's been a very committed Hokie and strong voice in that class. Chris, when you think about that, what Williams has done in terms of recruiting and kind of being that guy that's kind of helped keep the class together, but also where do you see him fitting? I guess he's more of an outside linebacker.
He basically plays the star linebacker position in high school, just like Caleb Woodson, who was in last year's class. And I think that's the position he will initially play at Virginia Tech. And after that, it depends on how big he gets in his development and things like that. I don't think he's a guy who, as soon as he enrolls, you're going to stick him at an inside linebacker position. I don't think that would be fair to him. Like, I think he needs to get bigger before you think about that. So I would say for his initial year at Virginia Tech, he's most definitely a star. And then see where he's at after that freshman year. I love his length. He's a really good athlete who can run. He plays physical too, but to play physical at the college level, he's going to have to add mass. So he's going to be Dwight Galt's going to be his best friend, or maybe he's not his best friend, depending on your perspective.
Yeah, I don't know if they necessarily stick him at star. I 6'4" like that, and I feel like that position has been more safety DB type guys. I know he says he played some safety when he was in high school. I just think if you're 6'4" like that and less than 200 pounds, you're going to add some weight.
Sure.
Look at somebody like Lawson, who they've played at the Will spot. I think Will maybe is his best bet down the line.
They started Lawson off at star, though.
They did, and it didn't stick.
Correct.
And they moved safeties down there essentially, and Woodson was a defensive, but he was the first one they said that actually played that position.
But yeah,
when he was in
that's
high
what
school.
But he's playing the same position. Like they basically, if you watch their film, it's the same position. Him and Caleb Williams.
If
Gabe
you
Williams.
think that highly of Woodson, do you want Williams playing the exact same
Right.
spot?
I know that's the thing.
So I think it's going to depend where his body goes once he gets here, how big he gets. That's basically what Derek Jones told us when I asked about it today. But I don't know. I just have a feeling probably an inside spot eventually long term with him.
The other three guys are DBs. Joshua Clark, the only cornerback, or as Derek Jones would say, the only cheetah in the class. He's from Flint Hill School in Alexandria. He said, quote, "The thing that sold me on Josh," and I think I wasn't looking at you because you were sitting behind me when Derek Jones said it, but I imagined you smiling when he said this. "The thing that sold me on Josh was we had him in a 7-on-7 camp here 2 years ago, and he was going against Highland Springs kids. And he was going up against some of the more high-powered public schools. He was a guy that just kept showing up. And what you look for in a cornerback, you want to look for mentality. You want to look for competitive nature. You want to look for ball skills. And the thing that attracted me to Josh was he was playing receiver, and he's going against Braylon Johnson and Takai Heath, and he's catching balls on them. He's going up over them, and he's a year younger than them at the time."
Yeah, I think anytime you do well against Highland Springs guys, you deserve a serious look. I remember Tech took Zeke Wimbush in last year's class on a recommendation from Lauren Johnson, because Highland Springs had played them in the playoffs, and he had been played really well. And Lauren Johnson told the Tech staff, "Yeah, that guy can play football. You should take him." So Clark, when I watched his highlights a couple weeks ago, like in the first minute, there was like 5 interceptions, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to turn it off now. That's all I need to see. But yeah, it just seems like he's got a really good nose for the ball. He's a wide receiver too, so he's used to catching it.
It's interesting to me that they announced him as the only cheetah in the group. I feel like they were a little bit more positional flexibility in the past. Like all DBs are cheetahs when they come in, and now they're like sort of more targeted with the cornerback spot for him and the other two who we'll talk about here as safeties. But I thought that was an interesting delineation between those two this time.
Noah Jenkins, the Highland Springs kid, he played some wide receiver in high school. He played both sides. Brent Pry joked to Noah Jenkins when he was on the screen. He said something along the lines of, Fontel Mines is very upset that he wanted you on his side of the ball, but Derek Jones ultimately gets you. Derek Jones said of Jenkins, he's a special athlete. He's big, he's strong, he's talented. That's the type of guys, or actually, sorry, this was Fontel Mines. That's the type of guys we want to recruit. We want to recruit guys that could play on both sides of the ball. It's just another dynamic I love to see in an offense.
Actually, when you turn on his highlight tape, some of the first stuff that stands out is his play as a wide receiver. And apparently he was very impressive in the state title game against Freedom as a wide receiver. So you like guys that are good all around football players.
Are you surprised that he's going to play DB at Tech?
No, I don't think. I think his body build, he looks more like a DB, and I think Virginia Tech's need at safety right now. Not that I project him to play as a true freshman. You want to avoid that at safety as much as possible. Like as good as Mose Phillips was in the spring, and how much they hyped him up, and how good he was in practice, it was a different ball game when the season started. And even like guys like Cam Chancellor. Yeah, he played as a true freshman, but he played cornerback as a true freshman, not safety, right? That's too hard a position to play as a true freshman. But even like past that, I see he has a safety body, and Tech has, even in the pipeline, a number of good receivers. I think he'll probably play strong safety for Tech is my initial take on that.
The last guy is Quentin Reddish. safety from Independence High School in Charlotte. Derek Jones was up on stage and mentioned that he's been recruiting Charlotte for 15 years and that Reddish is one of the better prospects he's seen in his time. I followed up and asked him about it in the press conference after signing day, and he said, "We thought Quentin was a hidden gem from day one." Sounds like Tech got a good one there.
He likes to hit. I noticed that from his highlights. Not quite.
Not Mose Phillips
not
level?
Quite. It didn't have me yelling from one room to the other when I first started watching it. But he looks like he's a big hitter and he's got range. So I would say he's probably your free safety in this class, and Jenkins is your strong safety. But sometimes it can be tough to tell, and so you just kind of throw him out there in practice and figure it out then. That like Torian Gray in the past used to use spring practice and say, okay, we're just doing right safety and left safety to figure out who can play, free safety and strong safety and things like that. So that could be. But right now, I would view him as a free safety. But yeah, he's a guy that if you turn on the film as a senior, he's always around the ball.
In terms of big picture, we've covered all the guys. We've gone one by one. Chris, you mentioned that Laws is a 4-star. Anybody who when you're looking at this class, who would you consider? I don't know if you want to call them gems, but who would you consider as the players that you think might have the biggest impact soonest?
Yeah, some of that is Laws, and we'll see if Tech takes another transfer defensive tackle. If they don't, then I think he can play next year. I think that's why I think they'll take a third tackle. I think they probably should, but they don't have to because I think he will be capable of playing. I think you see safeties. I think both the safeties they signed are candidates to play early, but special teams. You don't want to throw a safety out there on defense as a true freshman. That is not ideal. We found that out this past season. I think Tech's cornerback depth should be good enough where where Clark should probably redshirt. I think most offensive linemen should redshirt, so I'm going to project a redshirt for all those guys, of course. And I would normally be like, yeah, Keelan Adams is going to play this year. But what have we been saying about the wide receivers? They're so deep. This is an ideal situation, though. It's a small class. I think Virginia Tech has done a good job with their recruiting last year and what they've done in the transfer portal. They've built up enough depth in their program where you don't look at this guy and say, yeah, you're a freshman. We have to play you. It's not that we want to play you, but we have to because we don't have any depth at that position. I just don't see much of that this year. Nothing jumps out at me and saying, yeah, that guy's going to have to play. I think there's guys on this list that could have played as true freshmen for Virginia Tech last year or even this past season to a certain extent. But the chances are less likely because of the talent level and the depth in the program has increased. It's not that these freshmen are any worse than other freshmen. It's just they're going to be entering a more competitive environment, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'd look at these guys. I'd say Wiggins and Adams maybe in a traditional class would have the best chance to get on the field, but that's the deepest position that Virginia Tech has right now. You're already talking about guys that are here right now. How are they going to get on the field with those four guys returning? Maybe Tyler Mason. Running backs tend to play early. I mean, it's easier for them to play early. It's sort of just like, here's the ball, hit the right hole, and also the blocking component, which holds a lot of guys back there. But in terms of just like running back instincts, those guys seem to get on the field early. But you've got Tootin, you've got Thomas right now. There's not a need for it right now. So, when you start talking about those linemen, I mean, a redshirt year really helps for all those guys, offensive and defensive. So, you say Laws. I said, what's his size right now? Like 265, something like
265
that.
265 to 270. Yeah,
it's like he'd have to get a lot bigger, I think, to say, oh, he's going to make an impact next year as a true freshman. It might be hard in this group to see somebody breaking through because there wasn't a lot this year. Right. I mean, it just wasn't a ton of opportunity for guys.
I thought it was interesting when you look at the defensive line, how much Tech added. 4 guys recruiting wise, and then 2 portal guys, obviously out of need because Mario Kendricks, Norrell Pollard, Feldarius Payne are leaving, but Tech could potentially add a 7th defensive lineman if Tech wants. What do you like about that room and just the way it's kind of trending right now? I know it's going to be a lot of new faces. Like when we go out and watch practice, it's going to kind of be like trying to figure out, okay, who's which number, and because all those guys are going to be new, at least 6 new guys, maybe 7. But what do you like about the way that group is trending? And it has APR coming back, Cole Nelson, who played well towards the end of the year, McDonald, Burgos. I feel like that group, after, and Brent Prime mentioned it, not rushing the passer well 2 years ago in 2022, that group was much better this year.
Much better. And a lot of that was APR, but the other guys were better too. And they were better all collectively as a group, in my opinion. And I think they can continue to get better. I think they have quality at defensive end. APR is an excellent player, obviously. Will play in the NFL at some point, most likely. There's not a star opposite of him. It's not a Corey Moore, John Engelberger situation, but the other guys are solid players. Like there's not really like a weakness there. Defensive tackle, these guys are going to have to prove it, although Peebles has already proven at this level. He's pretty much a sure thing. The other guys will have to prove it. Copeland will have to prove it at a JUCO, of course. But I still think they're going to be okay there. I feel a little safer if they added one more. But overall, I think they've done as well in the portal, assuming they add one more, as you could expect them to do in one position group in one off season. So I'm pretty happy the way it's going so far.
Will, Andy, either of you guys want to chime in on that, or we can move along to the transfers?
Yeah, I mean, I think 38 sacks this year speaks for itself.
Yeah,
I know that's not all defensive line, but you think of where they were, a couple years ago. Tywan Garbett was basically the only rushing threat they had up front, and he was hurt for most of the year. He missed a lot of those games. I've cited the 10 sacks stat, how long it's been since they've had a guy reach 10 sacks. I mean, for a while there, they didn't have a guy who would even reach 4 sacks or 5 sacks. It was a little difficult.
APR probably should have had 10. 20, 2 different times this
6
year.
days from now, it's going to happen.
Yeah. So it feels like they've changed the outlook in that room quite a bit, and we talk about star power. I mean, J.C. Price will always say that it's 4 rushing is 1. I mean, one guy might get home, but the other guys had a hand in that. So you need, a balanced rush across the front to create opportunities for those guys that actually do get home.
This is the first time, like I mentioned earlier, that we got a chance to ask about Peebles, Brumfield, Copeland, and Cunningham. Andy, Chris, what stood out to you guys about what the coaches said about them? Anything? I don't think anything was really surprising, but I thought what Derek Jones said about Peebles was very interesting. I think a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, Mike Villagrana said portal recruiting is like speed dating. And I think we might have used that phrase on the podcast once recently, or maybe in an article. I don't remember.
I know who's used it before. Kenny Brooks uses it all the time.
Does he
when
really?
He talks about transfer portal.
Maybe that's where I heard it. But it's an accurate statement. You've got 2 years to build a relationship with high school recruits. You got 2 weeks to do it with portal guys. It's really difficult. It always helps in situations where Jalen Lane had a pre-existing relationship with the tech staff. Sam Brumfield already knew Chris Marr from the days he was a high school recruit. Aeneas Peebles was, I believe, originally found by Derek Jones and recommended to the Duke staff. Peebles' mom did Derek Jones's wife's hair for 5 years in Durham. That's a relationship right there. Right?
Yeah,
it's somewhat luck.
You joked with me earlier. It's like Derek Jones knows everybody.
It's like there's 3 Derek Joneses. He knows everybody in North Carolina and Virginia. I mean, how random is that?
Yeah.
Come on. So I think some of it, you do have to do your due diligence on Cunningham, but I think he's a good player. I mean, he's shown that he's a good player, and and Copeland being an in-state guy, there's some connection there already, and so I even with the portal, yes, they've taken some guys that maybe they weren't 100% familiar with all of them, but there's been a lot of familiarity there with the portal guys that they have taken, and I think that always helps.
Yeah, I think Cunningham. We asked what position might he play, and they think he has some swingman possibilities, being a guard or a tackle. So that'll be something to watch going forward, how the competition shakes out on the offensive line. I thought, the coaches were pretty almost emotional talking about Copeland's path to Virginia Tech, and this video he made when he was a 9th grader in high school saying how he was going to come to Virginia Tech, and it wasn't a possibility to come out of high school. Then he prepped before he went to the Army, and it wasn't a possibility after Army. So he went to Iowa Western Community College, and did well enough, and probably went out there to see him, and now he's finally here. I thought that was interesting, just how long he's been trying to get to the Hokies, and now he's here, and an opportunity to compete for a starting job and play a pretty big role for this team going forward.
Yeah, he probably talked about how it was always kind of his dream to come to Virginia Tech. Will?
Yeah, so let me cut in here and say that referencing his first trip to Virginia Tech, October 24th, 2017, 6 years ago as a freshman.
And Jason Stame did an article earlier this week on that, and he caught up with Copeland. Actually did the interview before Copeland announced his commitment for Tech, and basically Copeland's like, yeah, that visit was my inspiration to play college football, and I always wanted to play football at Virginia Tech after that. It's something to be said, and you can't build this into a recruiting ranking. It's something to be said for determination and people stopping at nothing to achieve their goals. I mean, this guy went to Army, and he went to junior college in Iowa, which I wouldn't want to do, right? I mean, it's halfway across the country. You don't know anything about it. And then you've got guys like him at Laws waking up at 4 a.m. every morning to do 5-hour train rides to get the most out of his ability. So guys like that, if there's a certain level of talent, they're going to get the most out of it because of their dedication, and it's good to see a couple guys like that in this class.
Yeah, here's the money quote. Here's what he said about that visit. Ever since then, that was my spark of playing college football. That was definitely my spark. I knew then I wanted to play. I think just the whole experience, seeing Enter Sandman, that was huge. The staff, even talking to them in 8th grade, they seemed genuine. Oh, by the way, that was a different staff. I have a lot of friends there, so it'll be a reunion with my high school friends. It was pretty much everything about them. 6 years ago.
Yeah. Pretty crazy. Will, do you have any thoughts you want to just talk about our operation and how signing day went, and are you going to show off the cookies?
I got some rapid fire stuff here. First of all, I don't know how well you can see these. You can't see them at all if you're listening to the podcast. Many thanks to Annie Bitter's wife, Annie, for the Tech Sideline logoed cookies. Very cool. They taste as good as they look.
Bakery in Christiansburg got those done for us, but Annie was the one who...
No. Annie's the one.
She was the mastermind behind the whole operation getting that done. So shout out there.
Regarding Pry's comment about the, what do you call it, the Nittany Cryans? My wife is a Penn State grad, and I once called them the knitting lions around her. I did that once.
Well, it's funny because Pry said he got that from... he got the Nittany Cryans
from
because after the Penn State Ohio State game one year, his wife was crying on television, and ESPN tweeted like a picture of her and was like Nittany Cryans.
So like the Chiron or something on the broadcast or something like that. No. Penn State fans are all in my mentions. They're like, well, that's it. You're dead to us. like, settle down. Come on. It's like a little poke. Like,
go celebrate your own recruiting class, right?
I did want to point out that Chance Wiggins, all of the coaches proved it Chance. So It's spelled with a Z, but it is apparently pronounced with a C.
chances.
And apparently,
receiving court now.
Davi Belfort. You don't say the T.
The T is silent. Davi Belfort. Yeah, I noticed that also.
Yep.
We were talking about J.C. Price earlier, so I Googled him. Here's trivia for you guys. What does the J.C. stand for, according to Wikipedia?
That's a great question. I don't think I have no idea.
I had no clue. Andy?
I don't know. I was going to go look it up.
That's awesome. We stumped Andy. Joseph Carl Price.
Joseph Nick Brown behind the scenes gives a nice thumbs up.
And so one last bit of data I wanted to throw out there. This various forms of this are making the rounds on Twitter. In 2022, 2 classes ago, UNC signed 5 of the top 8 in Virginia, which is completely disgusting. But that happened 2 years ago. Mac Brown, Virginia Tech's highest ranked signee, and this is a 247 composite.
And how many of those are in the portal now?
I'll get to that in a second, my friend. Virginia Tech's highest ranked recruit, and this is a 247 composite, was Gunnar Givens at number 9. of those 5 UNC signees, 4 are in the portal. Zach Rice, who was number 1 recruit in the state, is still there and not in the portal. The ones in the portal are wide receiver Andre Green Jr., tailback George Pettaway, wide receiver Tyshawn Chapman, who is committed to Marshall, and cornerback Tayon Holloway. So, don't do drugs, kids. Be careful. Don't go to UNC if you're from the state of Virginia.
Jeez.
The next year in 2023, also equally disgusting to look at, Penn State signed 6 of the top 10 in the state of Virginia. Virginia Tech's highest rated recruit was Antonio Cotman Jr. at number 16. None of the PSU guys are in the portal. I checked on them. Now, 2024 this year, Virginia Tech signed 3 of the top 10 in the state, which leads, as Andy mentioned, Georgia signed by the 247 composite. Georgia signed the number 1 and number 2 players in the state. But at least Virginia Tech's starting to get a bit of a foothold there. And Penn State hasn't signed anybody in the state of Virginia, and I'm not sure UNC has either.
By the rankings, it's a down year in Virginia if you just go by the rankings.
Yeah.
Because Keelan Adams is technically only a 3-star recruit by 247, but he's like number 5 or number 6 in the state. Whereas the year Gunnar Givens came out, Givens was a 4-star recruit, but ranked 12th in the state.
Yeah.
And as we know, the rankings are infallible.
Yes, I know.
Never incorrect.
But looking ahead to early 2025, I believe it's very early, but there's something like 9 4-star players in the state. So maybe at least from the recruiting standpoint, it's ticking back up.
This is, I guess we'll do one podcast after Christmas, but this is the last podcast we're going to do before Christmas. We already did our Military Bowl preview. I'm going to talk about that real quick in a sec. Will, anything you want to say just to wrap the year up? I mean, we'll talk, I think, probably once more after the Military Bowl, but there's a chance that might not be until 2024.
Just it's been our first season with Andy working with us. Tech Sideline changed greatly when we hired him. It was there's an old saying when you're a parent and you have 2 children, then you have the third, you go from playing man to man to playing zone. There's a big difference between 2 and 3. And we discovered this fall there was an enormous difference between having 3 guys working for us like we did in the past and adding that 4th. It felt like we doubled the size of our staff. So I thought that just the coverage, the depth and breadth and quality of the coverage of this football season was phenomenal. And we really appreciate everybody who subscribes. And there's just so much good stuff. I joke with people all the time. Even I don't read it all. I'm sorry, but I have to run the business and stuff like that. But it's just, I've been really pleased with the content. And as far as where the football staff is going, one thing I did want to say about recruiting is not only are they doing a better job of recruiting in-state players out of high school, they're getting them when they bounce back, when they go somewhere else and come back. And those 2 things together really strengthen the ties for in-state recruiting.
Final thoughts on signing day. Andy, do you feel like, I think Tech's probably done in terms of high school kids. Do you feel like Tech needs to take any more portable guys? I know Chris mentioned maybe another tackle.
I don't think it has to. I think maybe they feel better about it. I don't know. I look at the roster and I don't see any glaring holes on it right now. I will say, just big picture, I don't want to throw water on this whole thing, but everybody's so excited on signing day. It's like half of these guys will transfer. That's just, I'm sorry, that's the math on it. You go back on all this stuff, and it's amazing. Every year, you talk about all the players. This guy could be this guy could be this, and it works out for a number of them. And then there's just a math problem. Like, there's just only so many guys that can play, and there's guys that will run into problems either academically or just didn't like the fit or whatever. And now the transfer portal exists. So it used to be like a third of the guys would contribute, a third of them would just kind of be reserves and be around, and a third of them would be attrition. And now I think it's closer to half of them, maybe even more than half sometimes, transfer because that portal is available like that. So we're going to get all excited about all these players coming in, and then like half of them will do something and half of them probably won't.
Tell you what, it was much funnier when Andy said that to me when we were in the middle of watching the guys announce, and it's like damn, like
I keep it real.
Really,
come on,
yeah, this
I keep it real. This sea of optimism at the signing day show, and I gotta be
he's right though. Yeah.
2 years ago, Bryce Duke was my favorite recruit. He's in the
Right.
portal now.
Come on now. I'm not a propagandist. I'm not here
No,
to
I'm
just
just-
write.
no, I'm just saying-
everything's
No,
all great with
I-
every single
See,
player
that's
all the
what
time.
Andy brings to the organization: the cold water, the bring down, man. Keep it. By the way, Andy ran an article recently revisiting his preseason predictions, almost dead on. And you can argue that because he's not emotionally invested, he didn't graduate from the school, he was never a fan, and all that stuff. He's brought something to us that we didn't have before.
And the coaches cost him one of his picks.
That's right. And clearly, and let's not go back and check this. I was unwavering in my 6-6 prediction the entire season. There was never a moment in time where I said this team's not going to make a bowl game. There's no reason to go back and check the archives about that. I can tell you right now.
I
Unwavering.
think the most important thing was you won by or sell.
That's right. We didn't even do one for the
No, we
the bowl
didn't.
game.
And I texted Gio about it, and I was like,
Oh,
it didn't feel right.
I forgot about that.
I was like, it wouldn't feel right if I didn't. Do
You're
it.
right. Reluctantly, I will accept this championship trophy.
Chris, any final thoughts on the portal? Or sorry, on signing day, but also the portal, and like Andy said, there don't seem to be, like, if we had signing day last week, there would be some glaring holes still.
Yeah.
Today feels a little bit different. It seems like Tech is kind of shored up everything.
Yeah, I feel good about it. I'd like to have one or two more portal guys. Like, my ideal world, you sign one more defensive tackle and, like, probably another offensive lineman. Can't have everything we want, but I still think Tech might be able to do that. The portal closed. The January portal closes earlier this year. It closes on January 4th, as opposed to, like, I think last year was like the 18th or something like that. It was basically when the second semester started. So it's a shorter window, but there will be another window after spring practice, and you could see more movement there. But we mostly know the roster. I think this staff is excellent when it comes to roster management. So it's going to be rare when we have a conversation like this and you're just like, oh, gosh, they should have done this and they made a big mistake there and things like that. Nah, these guys know what they're doing when it comes to spreadsheet work with a football roster.
Well, I mean, just think about it. When did Antoine Powell-Ryland commit last year?
That was after
May.
spring.
I think it was
And
May.
I think that's something to keep an eye on too. There will be attrition because there has to be. The numbers have to work, and they will, as always. But there's another portal window in April. Like
It's that math thing. I mean, there's only so many reps to go around. And I think inevitably somebody will feel disappointed about their standing on the team. And when that happens, now the transfer portal exists, but that also opens up opportunities for people to come in. And some good players are still available then. So
And there will be another round of portal exits, probably when the second semester starts.
once they lock in the scholarship money for
exactly.
the next
Yep.
semester, yeah.
The last thing I want to do before we talk about what's coming up on TechSideline.com, I want to briefly touch on the Military Bowl. After we recorded our Military Bowl preview podcast, Damian Sordelette of the Roanoke Times texted Andy and I a link to a NOLA.com article where it talked about all of the Tulane players that are and are not playing. As such,
Behind a paywall. That's why we didn't see it.
yeah. Well, also because the writer never tweeted it out and we couldn't find it anywhere on social media.
We regret to inform you that 90% of the preview was
Yep.
incorrect.
Guys who we thought were playing or not playing.
I tell you what. So Chris basically Chris was like about half right in terms of guys playing and not playing, but it didn't really affect the preview too much. The only big thing is the two defensive linemen that Chris said were not playing, they are playing, and the two cornerbacks that we're going to play are not playing.
Yeah, so my whole thing was like, well, you got a big advantage in the run game now because their starting defensive ends aren't playing, but man, their secondary is awesome, so let's go establish the run and then throw off of that. Yeah. Now it's kind of like, well, their secondary is depleted, but their defensive line looking pretty stout. Yeah. So this is again, I don't know how coaches prepare for signing day and the bowl game at the same time.
Yeah.
Like having to do both. I'm writing that preview yesterday or 2 days
Monday.
ago, and every 5 seconds Tech is getting a commitment from a portal guy. So I'm trying to write the preview and follow all of that. But not to mention, like, nobody covers Tulane football. So there was, like, no information about their football team. I had to pull up the tweets of individual players who entered the portal. And most guys, when they enter the portal, they indicate that they're going to play in the bowl game, if they're planning on it. None of their guys were like, yeah, I'm in the portal, but I'm going to play in the bowl game. They were like, I'm in the portal. I've committed to Houston, so I'm assuming, no, they're not going to play.
Yeah.
Turns out,
and nobody reported that they were or were not until
Right.
like late Monday.
turns out like they got those defensive ends are like committed to other schools, but they're still going to play in the bowl game. Like
Aeneas Peebles. He's playing in Duke's bowl game coming up.
Oh my
a couple
God.
days.
I
Don't
found
get
that out
hurt, dude.
today. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah. But anyway.
Nobody here likes that.
Anyway.
I commend him for doing it.
The military bowl.
like it.
The military bowl is in a week. It's a week from today. Andy and I are going up to Washington D.C. There's military bowl media stuff Friday, Saturday, Sunday, leading up to the game next Wednesday. We will have plenty of coverage up there from Washington D.C. If you want to go look at who is and who's not playing, I will try to keep up with it the best I can. Go to our preview. There's a list of players in and out for Tulane, and starters are highlighted. And I even listed the Tulane coaching staff that's been shifted around. They have 3 GAs coaching in the bowl game, 2 on the defensive side of the ball. Last thing, before we go, what's coming on TechSideline.com? Obviously, we're going to be in DC. Andy, you've got a signing day story coming as soon as we get off the podcast.
Signing day today. I think I'll save the stuff on the transfers for tomorrow.
Okay.
We've written a lot about that this week. I want to focus more on the high school guys, but I think a lot of the interesting stuff, and we talked about in this podcast, was about the transfers because they're going to play more immediately than the other ones. So I'm going to separate that into a different article.
I've got my signing day column coming tomorrow. I'm mostly finished with it. Just got to figure out the last section. Brandon Patterson's got 2 more Tulane previews coming. He's going all out for this ball game for a team that we didn't know who
Well,
was
Brandon
playing.
gets paid by the article.
That's
so
true. I don't blame him. Yeah.
It's Christmas time.
Smart man.
A normal, let's see, I'll have my normal Friday Q&A. I have to go Christmas shopping too at some
Yeah,
point.
I need to
don't
go
know when I'm
Christmas
gonna do
shopping
that.
too.
Just re-gift some Tech Sideline cookies to people, and you'll be set.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to Substation too because tomorrow's the last
Is
day.
it tomorrow? Yeah.
Sad
Tear
time. I know.
comes to the eye.
I know. Basketball doubleheader. I'll be plenty busy. Well, a bunch of basketball stuff because men and women both play tomorrow.
You should order one of those like 20-foot long party subs, and then you just like have it for days on end.
Yeah. Anyway, appreciate you guys. Appreciate all of us doing this. Hope everybody has a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Probably not the last podcast for 2023. We'll probably do one right after the bowl game. But in case it is, happy 2023. For Chris Coleman, for Andy Bitter, for Will Stewart, for Nick Brown behind the scenes, who is, congratulations, going to the Radford High School football championship parade because they won the state title. I'm David Cunningham, signing off from episode 338 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We will be back after the bowl game to talk about the Military Bowl and more. Stay tuned and Merry Christmas. Happy Holidays.